channel if you haven't been here before, or welcome back if you watch my videos. And if you do, I thank you so much. I love to upcycle clothes, and I've been doing it for many years. I sold for many years, and now I just do tutorials for you. And because of all of you, I am monetized on YouTube. So now I get paid for my tutorials, the ads on my tutorials. So I still get to upcycle and do what I love and get paid. And I thank you all so much for that. Today we are making a skirt. And I found this curtain. It's black and white toile. And I love toile. And it's a curtain, $4.99 at my Goodwill. So look how big it is. That's a lot of fabric. Could you imagine going to the fabric store and buying this by the yard? It would be so much money. $4.99. This was the inspiration for my skirt. Let's get started. Okay, so I'm basically going to be making this from scratch. And I haven't done that before. I normally take thrifted skirts and just add things to them. I don't have to worry about a waistband or anything. And I'll show a little slide clip at the very end of this video of a bunch of skirts I've sold and made in sort of a, a tiered style. But I think I got it figured out. I've been doodling this morning, and I want to keep it simple because I don't want to spend days on this, and I don't have a very good attention span. So if I have to spend days on something, I usually won't do it. So hopefully it's simple for you too. So let's figure it out together. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is measure and decide what I want the finished skirt length to be. Now I want mine to be high-waisted, and I want it to hit to about the bottom of my calf because I envision a pair of tall, skinny boots coming out from the bottom of the skirt. And I want to be able to see them, so I'm not going floor length. And by the way, I have a tutorial for this duster too. It's made out of like 3 or 4 black lace dresses, and I'll put the link to that in my description. Okay, so I am going to take a yardstick, and I'm going to place it, I want it high-waisted. I want it to hit about the bottom of my ribs, above my belly button, and then about mid-calf. And I got 29 inches. You might have to have someone get down low and see where that number is. It's kind of hard to see it yourself. But so I'm going to take that number, 29 inches, here I am, and I'm going to jot that down on a piece of paper. Okay, so now I want to cut my curtain fabric, and I have to do a little simple math. So 29 inches is the amount I got for my finished skirt length. But I am going to add 10 inches of ruffle total to the bottom. And if I add that to the 29 inches, it's going to be dragging on the floor. So I have to subtract that 10 inches of ruffle that I'm going to add. And I get 19 inches. Okay. And now I need to make room for seam allowance. And I need 3 inches, 2.5 inches, but I'll go 3 to be safe for seam allowance. So I need to add that. I need to add 3 inches, and that gets me 22 inches. And that is the length I am going to cut my curtain fabric. Okay, I'm just going to interject a little something here. I'm talking about the 22 inches, and so I started cutting my fabric, the 22 inches, and I just wasn't feeling that I have enough toile. Toile is my favorite fabric, and I just wasn't seeing enough. So I made a decision to go 24 inches tall. And just for reference, if you're thinking about using similar measurements, I'm about 5'4", about a 28 waist, and about 128 pounds. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is just simply deconstruct my curtains. This is lined. I don't want the lining. I just want this fabric. So I'm just cutting off any decorative bands or seams. I'm just cutting it open. have a button right there. Okay, I'll get that all deconstructed and I'll come back. Okay, so I cut 2 pieces of fabric off of my curtain. They're rectangle shaped and they're 50 inches long, both of them, because that's how wide my curtain was and I want lots of volume. And so they're 24 inches tall and 50 inches long. They're just big rectangles. Okay, so now what I want to do is cut each piece of fabric into a shape sort of like this. This is just a little mini version. And in order to get this measurement right here, I need to measure my waist, and I'm 28 inches, and I am going to add 2 inches, which is 30, because this has no give. If I went 28 inches, I'm not going to be able to get that up above my hips. And we will be putting elastic at the top. So I am going to use 30 inches as my waist measurement. Okay, so I have 2 pieces. One will be the front, one will be the back. I don't want a 30-inch measurement here for the waist because then this would be 30 and that would equal 60, and I don't need that much around my waist. So I have to cut that in half. Half of that waist will be on this one and half will be on this one. So my measurement's 30. I want 15 here and 15 on this one. So what I'll do is just fold this in half, and I want to mark on the back. It'll be way easier to see and then less noticeable on the pattern side. We don't want to mark that up. So I am just folding this nicely. Okay, now I'm going to choose what I want to be the top. And on mine, direction does matter because this has little people and trees and things. So I want this to be the top, my people right side up. And yours may not matter. That just makes things more simple if it doesn't matter. Okay, so I have this all folded. Now I'm going to the top, and since I want 15 inches for my waist on each one, and it's folded, I am going to go, make sure that's lined up nicely, from that fold and mark over 7.5 inches, because that's half of 15, and this is folded, so half is here and half is on the other side. Okay, so I had to go find my yardstick. So here's the mark we made, 7.5 inches over from the fold. I'm going down to the corner of this open side, and I am just going to line that up at the corner and that dot and make a straight line. And now I will cut it out. Just cut along that line. Okay, so this is what that looks like. And now I'm going to lay it on top of my other piece of fabric, and this will basically just be my pattern. I'll get that lined up nicely and come back. Okay, see, I just have it laid out on top of my other rectangle, and now I'm just going to cut that out. I'm just going to follow that line. I don't do any pinning or anything for something like this. You can if you want to be super precise, but my stuff always turns out decent without having to do some of those extra steps. So I'll just finish cutting this out. Okay, so now I'm just going to stick a few pins in the sides here just to keep it together. I don't need to put a ton. So I will continue pinning down this side, and then I will do the same on this side. And then I will just simply sew it together. I will go to my machine. I will use, I haven't decided if I'm going to use black or white since it's both colors in this fabric, but whatever thread I choose. And then I will do a 1/4 inch seam allowance, a fairly small straight stitch along each line, each side. Okay, so on this one, I have right sides together. And if you watch a lot of my videos, you know I do wrong sides together because I like to see the hem and the seams on the outside and all the frame. But this one I just want to keep clean and put right sides together. Okay, I'm over by my ironing board, and what I want to do now, so this is still inside out, I want to put a double rolled hem at the waist, and I need to press that in order to do it, and I'll show you how I do it. Okay, I'm just going to open up that small end, the waist, and slide it over the small end of my ironing board. And I am just going to fold it over 1/2 inch. Now I'll measure the first one just to make sure it's 1/2 inch, and then I'll just take my iron and press it. Okay, and then the rest I can just kind of eyeball and then just check now and then that I didn't get away from my 1/2 inch measurement. I'll just check this, make sure I stay at 1/2 inch because I want this to be nice and tidy at the top here. Okay. Now once I visualize that, I don't really have a problem just eyeballing the rest. So I'll do that all the way around the top, press that 1/2 inch down. Okay, I have that first one folded over 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to fold it over again and give it another press. Now this time I'm going to stick a couple pins in. And then I'll just pin that. Once they get wider, they don't want to stay down as much as just like one fold over. And then I will just continue to do that all the way around. Does anybody else love the smell of ironing? The fabric and the detergents? I don't know. I just love it. Okay, so I have the top all pinned. Now I'm just going to remove this front plate and just slide it under my needle. And I'm going to stay fairly close to the bottom, as close as I can, and I'll just try to do a nice straight line. And I decided to go with white thread, and I'll do a fairly small straight stitch. Okay, now I'm just going to turn it right side out. This is what it's looking like. And now I want to put some elastic. It should be fairly simple in the waistband. Okay, I slipped this on to see if it would fit, and it would not come up over my hips. So I need to change the measurement that I gave you for the waist. Instead of adding 2 inches, add 8 inches because we want a little bit to gather as well. I'm going to have to add a little fabric to this, but I hope you don't lose faith in me. You know, I could just chuck the whole project, but I think this skirt is going to be too beautiful to give up on it now. So if you just add 8 inches to your waist size instead of 2, you should be just fine. Okay, I have it all fixed. So that 8 inches I told you, that'll be good. This slipped right on. I have a little room here for gathering. It's kind of like you're down here working with me. That's what I like to envision. We're all doing this together. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to show you real quick how I fixed it. So I had to add a panel of fabric right here. And then I had to add a piece to that panel because I didn't have a piece long enough. But I did wrong sides together so that the seams are on the outside. And so I'm hoping when it's washed and dried, these frayed edges will just kind of be white frayed lines and may look very intentional. Had I done right sides together and perfect seams, it would probably look like I made a mistake. And why are those seams there? Well, someone might go, oh, how creative to put seams like that for decoration. So that's my hope. Okay, so now what I want to do is cut the elastic for the waist. And I have some of this elastic that I used for making masks. It's about a 1/4 inch elastic. And I took that and I measured around my waist and gave it a little, I already have mine cut. I cut 3 of these. And I gave it a little tug so that it sits on there nicely without falling down. Sometimes these skirts can get a little weight to them with all the fabrics, and you want to make sure it's not falling down. And so my waist size is typically about 28, and I do want my skirt to sit up here, fit around here. And so my elastic is 27. It's about 1 inch smaller than my actual waist size. So just measure, maybe you want your skirt low. Just measure where you want it and, give it a little tug and see what feels comfortable and cut 3 pieces that length. I'm cutting 3 at 27 inches. Okay, so here are my 3 pieces of elastic and I'm at the top of my skirt. This is the waistband and 1 piece of elastic I'm going to sew right at the base of that hem. And I'll show you how I do that. But the other 2, we're basically doing kind of a wide band with sort of a sheared effect. And so I am measuring down with my ruler 1 inch down from the bottom of that hem. And I'm just making little dashes. I'll need a guideline when I'm sewing this elastic, and I may connect those. I may not. You don't have to, but as long as you have your dashes fairly close together. And I will make that 1 inch mark all the way around the skirt. Now you can use any writing utensil you want, chalk, whatever. I use marker a lot. So, and then from that line, once I get that done all the way around the skirt, I'm going to measure down 1 inch again. And then just keep going down and making those dashes. And that will be my bottom elastic. Okay, so basically when you sew elastic like this, we're shearing. So when we sew, we'll stitch this on and we'll stretch this elastic as we run it through the machine. Now I like to do this just to make sure I don't have too much elastic on one side and it loose on the other. I like to take the end of my elastic and find either the center or a side seam and pin it where I need to sew it. I'm only going to be sticking 4 pins in this. And so then I'll take the elastic around the skirt, the waistband, and I'll pin the other end right by that first piece. I'll move that when I'm sewing it, but right now it's just easier to sew it just slightly above the other one. And now I'm going to find the center between the back, basically on the opposite side. I'm going to find the center. So we're starting it here. I just want to make sure that's pretty even. And then I'll find the center of my elastic and I'll pin that. And then I'll do the same on the very sides. I'll just try to find the center between where I just pinned and the center of the elastic and pin that. And I'll only do one at a time. I won't do these other 2 rows until I'm done stitching this one on. And so that gives me a good idea when I'm sewing how much I need to stretch, because I won't know if I don't do this how much elastic is left. Am I stretching too hard and not going to, I'm going to have too much elastic at the end. So this just makes sure it's balanced out. And then when I go to my machine, I'll grab those 2 pins and I'll stretch that and I'll stretch it through the machine. And then I know I have the correct amount. And then when I go to the next section, I'll stretch that and run it through the machine. Okay, I still have my front plate off. I'm going to slip this in near one of those pins, and I'm just sewing it at the base of that hem, on the hem, but at the very bottom. And I am just going to start by sticking my needle in. I'm using a fairly small straight stitch. Now I can remove my needle. And I'm going to grab this pin, which is my next one, and I'm going to stretch that. That way I know just how much to pull to get it evenly dispersed around the skirt. Now just sew along that waistband. Okay, so I have this elastic all sewn on, and now I'm just repeating that process with the pinning. I have this pinned in the center. You might want to find your side seams and start pinning there, just because you know that those are equally dispersed. Now I will find the center of this, the center of my elastic, pin that, really however you want to do it, just to make sure that you just have it pretty much equal everywhere. All right, I'll get those pinned and I'll sew it on, and then I'll go ahead and sew the 3rd row on as well. Okay, that's what my 2nd row is looking like. I'm just following those dotted lines. Now I'm on the 3rd one. I'll do the same to that. That's what it's looking like in the front. Okay, I have my waistband all sewn, and now I'm just bringing it to my ironing board, and I'm just going to give it a good press. Make sure those little ruffles are nice and straight up. And once I'm done ironing the waistband, I'm going to go ahead and press these seams now. Anywhere where I made a seam, let's see, I'm trying to find one. Okay, so there's a side seam that I originally made. I'm just going to give that a press too. And then I'll have to do the ones on the insert that I added, but I'll do that from the opposite side. Okay. Okay, so here's what we have so far. Now we get to do the ruffles. Okay, so when you upcycle, people love to give you their wedding dresses. And so I have a couple from a couple friends here, and I'm going to use parts of them for the ruffle at the bottom of the skirt. And on this one, this has a sheer overlay. I am going to cut this overlay off of the dress, and I'm going to use some of that. And then this one has tulle, a couple layers of tulle, one here and actually one underneath. I will just go underneath of here and cut the tulle off as well. Okay, what I need to do to begin the ruffles is measure what the bottom of this skirt is in total circumference. And so I'll just find a seam or something and lay my my tape measure down, and I'll just go around and measure that. And I came up on mine with 106 inches. Okay, so now I want the tulle to be my sort of base fabric for the ruffles, and I wanted my ruffles to be 10 inches tall. There'll be a total of 10 inches, but they'll be 2 or 3 tiered, probably 3 tiered. So I want this to be 10 inches since this is my base. And that 106 inches that I got, the circumference of my skirt, I want to double that. So I want this to be 212 inches long. I think I said 106, close enough, right? So I want this to be 212 inches long, and I may have to piece it together to get that length, but I want it 10 inches tall and over 200 inches long. To cut this, I'm just finding a seam here, and I'm cutting up about 10 inches. I know this tool is impossible to see, but I lay my ruler at 10 inches on the bottom, and I just start cutting like that. I don't do any marking. This does not have to be perfect. It's actually cuter if it's not perfect. So I will just keep cutting until I have enough. Okay, so I bet you've always wondered, can you iron tulle? No, you probably never wondered that. But the answer is yes. Thank goodness, because this was pretty wrinkled. Okay, so here's my tool, 10 inches this way. And now what I want to do is create another layer. We'll stitch all these layers to the very top of the tool to create one full layer. But my next layer I want to add will be 9 inches tall, and I just want the tool sticking out just like an inch below that. So I'll show you what I do for that. Okay, what I'm going to do is alternate that sheer fabric that I cut off the wedding dress, and I have this lace tablecloth, this vintage lace tablecloth. Now it's stained up. It's got a lot of big stains. I don't know where they are at the moment. So that's a perfect cutter piece. I'll just cut around those stains. So what I'll do is I'll take a pattern. I made this. It's 13 inches across and 9 inches tall, because 9 inches is what we want for that second ruffle. And then I went to my, let's see, I'll show you on this tablecloth here. I'll do this on the sheer and on this tablecloth. And I made a pattern because I don't want to be measuring every single square. We are going to alternate the lace and the sheer to make the 212 inch long piece that we'll sew on to the tool. So this just will be a lot of cutting. And to make it easy, I made a pattern, and these do not have to be perfect. And I can stick a pin in the middle so it doesn't shift around too much. But if it shifts a little, that's no big deal, because these are kind of cool when they're not perfect. And then I'll just trim these edges a little bit. And I'll just try to do as many of the sheer as I am the lace, because then I will sew those all together in one long band, but I'll show you that. Okay, once I get my pieces all cut out, basically equal number of lace and the sheer, I am just going to go to my machine and sew them all together. And I will do seams on the outside. So basically wrong sides together, and I will just alternate lace, sheer until I have them all sewn together. And I'm just using a fairly small straight stitch. And do not worry if they don't line up perfectly at the bottom. That's cute too. Mine are lining up, but it's okay if it's not perfectly lined up. Not a big deal. Okay, so now I have these all sewn together. I'm going to do one more thing while I'm sitting at my machine here. And that is, I'm going to the bottom of this ruffle. The top doesn't matter because it will be sewn, but I'm going to the bottom if I can find it, And I am just going to, let's say we're starting at the beginning. I can't find it in this pile, but I'll start at the very end, and I will set my machine on my largest zigzag stitch, and I'm just going to run a stitch along the bottom of that ruffle for the pieces that are raw edges. The zigzag stitch will have a little bit of fraying below it, but it will stop excessive fraying. So I'm just basically finishing off the edge with the zigzag stitch. Okay, so one more thing. If you're using sheer and not a thicker fabric, you want to put your tension on a low number. I set mine, I typically keep it at 5. I put it down to 2. Okay, so this is what we have so far. I have the tulle right here, and then I have that layer that we just sewed together, just laying on top of it for now. It'll eventually all be sewn together. And now I want to do one more layer of black, and I'll show you what I do. Okay, I'm going to make my final layer black, and I'm going to use this skirt that I thrifted. And the first thing I will do with this is just cut the side open so that I can open this up and see what I'm working with here. Okay, so it's all open, and I laid it out on my table, and I'm starting at the bottom because that is the biggest ruffle or the biggest width. And I am just going to take my ruler. I want this one to be 5 inches tall. So I will just lay my ruler at the edge and just keep moving it, cutting 5 inches. Like I said, this does not have to be perfect. Okay, and so I'll cut 5-inch strips until I get 212 inches. I'll have to piece these together just like I did the other ones, and that'll give us the top layer. Okay, I have this ruffle stitched together. I don't know if you can see that. These are very different. There are different areas on the skirt that look differently. And for me, that's not only okay, that's desirable. I like when they all kind of look a little different from one another. Okay, so now what I want to do is piece all 3 of these together. I have the tulle, the lace and sheer, and then the black. Now there's 2 ways you can do this. You can line this all up at the top because they all need to be sewn together, lined up at the top, all 3 pieces, and pin that if you want. Or what I'm going to do is I don't want to deal with pins. So I will just take this to my machine, line up the white, the tulle, and that other white layer, and do a fairly small straight stitch just all the way down, just lining it up as I go without pinning it. And then when I'm done with that, I'll come back, and then I'll have to do the same with the black, but I think that'll go a lot faster. I think pinning this would take forever. Okay, at my machine, and actually you don't really have to use that small of a stitch because this is going to be sewn like 3 times up here at the top. And I just have the edge of this lined up next to my presser foot. I don't want to go very deep with the stitching on this at all. Okay, now I have these all sewn together, the tulle and that other layer. I just laid the black on top, and I'm going to sew that across. Now I have the black sewn to the top of the ruffle, and I added a couple other details. I added some lace at the top, and I also sewed that right at the very top of the ruffle. And what I did there is I went back to that tablecloth vintage lace that I used, and I cut out long strips about 2.5 inches wide, and I went to the top of that ruffle, and I just stuck it in my machine. I didn't pin or anything, and did the stitching and back stitching, and then I just did subtle little ruffles as I sewed along, and just kind of pinch pleat that a little bit. I didn't go crazy and make them really big. I just did a little bit until I was finished with the entire ruffle. The other detail that I added was not the first layer, the tulle, but on the second layer, 2 inches up, I added just a really tiny little ruffle. And what that was this skirt, and I used this actually a while back on that black duster I was wearing yesterday in this video, but I still have some neat pieces left on this. This is just like a little net lace type fabric, and I just trimmed off about 3/4 of an inch along the bottom and just made long strips, and I'll show you what I did for that. All I did with this little black strip now is I went 2 inches up from that bottom of that second ruffle, and I just did some pretty dramatic pleating as I sewed along. And I did not measure 2 inches up. I'm just eyeballing it. And these don't have to be perfect. And I just created that just like that. So now we're all done making the ruffle. And now we just need to sew the ends together and add it to the skirt. But I just want to add something here. You don't have to use all these things that I'm using. You don't need to run out and buy wedding dresses. The only thing I bought recently for this project was the curtain. I had everything else, and I just make do with what I have. Maybe you want to go to the thrift store if you like thrifting and find a few skirts. Find a skirt that fits you, and then you don't have to even deal with it making a waistband. And if you find a skirt that fits you and you like the curved bottom of the skirt we just made, just cut out a curve at the bottom and make a ruffle like we did, maybe out of a couple other really big skirts or a big dress that they always have a lot of fabric. And you can also do this with a dress. Maybe you find a kind of a plain dress or a cool dress that just needs a little something else at the thrift store, or you have one. You can add a ruffle to that. I've done that, and I'll actually show you some pictures at the end of this of dresses as well as skirts. Now, I know I'm talking a lot, but I get so excited because once you have a basic concept of something like this, this could be shorter, not 212 inches long, and be a sleeve. Or maybe you have a baggy pair of long shorts or capris. You add a detailed ruffle like this to that, and you have bloomers. I mean, maybe this could be even wider. You make it maybe 36 inches wide, and you have a shawl. I mean, like something basic like this can go a long way and really do a lot of fun things. Okay, let's finish this up. The next thing I want to do is sew my 2 ends together. So I found the very end, each end of this ruffle, and I am only going to sew the tulle, the very bottom layer, together. And I will do wrong sides together because on this, I want the seams on the outside. If you want to hide the seams, you do right sides together. And so I am just, when I go to my machine, I won't even pin this. I will just take my 2 pieces of tulle at the top, and I'll have to stitch a little bit over top of some of this fabric and stuff to get to my tulle, but that's okay. And then I will just pull my tulle, line that up as I run it through my machine. You can pin yours if you like, but I don't need to. And I will do a zigzag stitch all the way down just because this is kind of gappy, and you know, those little holes, a zigzag stitch I feel will be more secure. That's all I'll do. I won't take you to my machine. I'll just run and do that, and then I'll show you what we do next. The next couple things I'm going to talk about here are just to make sure when we sew this ruffle onto the bottom of our skirt that the pleating and the ruffles are evenly distributed. So just super simple. I laid this completely out on my table. You might have to use your floor if you don't have a super long table. And I'm going to find the ends. Here's the end on this side, and then here's the end on this side. And I am going to take a straight pin, and on the outside, we are going to be sewing this right sides together. So I'm going to stick my pin on the outside, and I'm going to weave it in a couple times because they have been known to fall out. So I don't want them to fall out once I have this marked. Okay, so now I'm going to the opposite end, and I am going to put a straight pin there as well. Now, that shows me where my ends are. Now I want to eyeball this and find the center this way. So I know where the center is this way. Now I want to kind of make this into quadrants. So I am going to eyeball this, and I do not measure things like this. If I did, I would never get anything done. I'm just going to eyeball it. This looks like the center this way between the two ends, and I am going to stick a straight pin there as well. And then I'll come to the opposite side and put a straight pin in there. Now I'm coming to my skirt, again with my straight pins, and you will want to go to your seams on the outside. My seams aren't equal anymore because I had to add that center panel. So I will find the side, stick a straight pin in there. On yours it would probably be your seam. And then I'm going to the opposite side and stick a straight pin in there. Now I am going to find the center this way, just like we did on the ruffle, and stick a straight pin in there. And the same thing on the opposite side. Find the center and stick a straight pin there. So now I went back to my ruffle, and I'm laying one side out in front of me. It's face down and upside down because I'm sewing right sides together, and I just sort of pushed that other end out of the way, and then I located my pins, the one at this end, the one at this end, and the one in the center. And then I'll go to my skirt, and I want this, the right side facing me, and I'm going to spread it out. Now I am just going to take this ruffle and sort of lay it on top. And here's my center pin on my ruffle. Here's the center pin on my skirt. I am just going to line those up and pin them together. And I'll weave this in. I don't want to lose any pins here because this is kind of big and cumbersome. If you start losing pins, you start getting confused. Now, I'm going to my opposite end, find my pin on my skirt, find that pin on my ruffle, line those up. I'll remove the bottom one here, don't need that anymore. Then I'll just take this pin and pin that together. And then I'll do the same at the opposite end. Okay. So before I turn it over and do the same on the opposite side of the skirt, I'm just going to continue working on this for a little bit. And I'll probably put quite a few pins in this. So now I'm going to find the center just by eyeballing between this pin and this pin. Now it's easier because they're shorter and you can eyeball this a lot better because this does not have to be absolutely perfect. Then I'm going to find the center between this pin and this pin of the skirt and pin that together. And this just ensures that we're not going to have a glob of ruffle at one end and not enough at the other. And then now it's getting even shorter. Find the center there, and so on until you're comfortable. You know, you will have to do maybe a little bit of pleating, but once you know how far you have to go from one pin to another, you can have a way better idea of how much gathering you need to do. So see, I'm down to just this much, and I can do this, pin this if I want. I probably won't, because between this pin and this pin, I can eyeball that enough to know how much I will need to pleat that when I run it through my machine. Okay, so now I turned it over. This is the side we were just pinning. And I flipped it over to the other side because I'm all done with that. And I am just going to do that same process on this side. Find my pin on my skirt, pin on my ruffle, pin it together, and just continue doing what we did. I'll finish that up and I'll come back. Now that everything's pinned, it's just time to sew it on. I'll just take this over to my machine, slide it in anywhere. It doesn't really matter where you start. And I will use my widest zigzag stitch. I'll use a white thread, and you can go between a 1/4, 1/2 inch seam allowance. I don't get hung up on seam allowances. I let the fabric and the projects kind of speak to me. A lot of times when I have a lot of layers like this, I'll do 1/2 inch just to make sure everything's sandwiched in there and that I'm not missing anything. All right, off to my machine. Now I have this all stitched, and before I turn it all right side out, I'm just going to take some time and clean up those seams and just cut near close to that stitch line, just so it's nice and even all the way around. So now I have my seams all trimmed, and I haven't looked at it yet. This is always my favorite part. So we'll look at it together to see what we have. Love it. So I have my iron all fired up, and I am just going to give that seam we just sewed a press and make it nice and neat. I am going to finish pressing this. I'll put it on again for you to see, and I'll do a quick little slideshow at the end of this of dresses and skirts that I've made over the years, and you know, just for new ideas and maybe inspiration. And if you've made it this far, I'm humbled. Thank you so, so much.